Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about something that can quietly wreck your heart, your confidence, and your ability to trust your own instincts. Ladies and gentlemen, the first truth you must tattoo into your awareness is this: not every avoidant is a narcissist, and not every narcissist is loud, charming, or obviously cruel. The difference is not a label you use to win an argument. It is a lens you use to protect your life. An avoidant protects themselves from intimacy. A narcissist protects themselves from accountability. Learn that distinction, and you stop confusing emotional immaturity with emotional exploitation. You stop excusing harm because you feel sorry for someone's past, and you start honoring the reality of what your heart and nervous system are actually living through. Avoidant attachment is often a fear response. It can grow out of early experiences where feelings were ignored, mocked, or made unsafe. The avoidant learns a survival rule: needing someone equals danger. So when love gets intense, they back away. They shut down, they rationalize, they go quiet, they ask for space. This hurts, and it can be deeply destabilizing for someone who craves closeness. But the motive is usually self-protection. There is often anxiety underneath the calm exterior, and a wish to be close without feeling swallowed, exposed, or powerless. Narcissistic patterns, especially when they wear an avoidant mask, create a very different emotional climate. Here, the central fear is not intimacy, it is exposure. The central goal is not nervous system safety, it is image and power. Instead of saying, "I'm overwhelmed and I need a moment," they convert the spotlight onto your supposed flaws. Instead of saying, "I was wrong," they rewrite reality until the harm disappears and you become the unreasonable one. Their distance becomes a tool, not a coping mechanism. Their silence becomes punishment and leverage, not processing and emotional regulation. You can feel this difference most clearly when conflict arrives. A non-narcissistic avoidant may get defensive or awkward, but the door to accountability is still there. It might open slowly after time, after reflection, after a messy conversation. But you can sometimes observe signs of conscience, a willingness to revisit the issue, an admission that they handled something poorly, a desire to learn a better way. They are not skilled yet, but they are not allergic to responsibility, and that matters. A narcissist in disguise makes accountability feel impossible. You bring a clear concern, and the conversation turns into a trial about your tone. You mention a broken promise, and suddenly you are accused of being too sensitive. You ask for consistency, and your need is reframed as a character defect. This is not misunderstanding. This is the avoidance of responsibility dressed up as boundaries. And it is designed to exhaust you into silence until you stop asking for what any healthy relationship requires. This is why this keynote matters so much. It gives you permission to stop softening red flags into sad stories. An avoidant can love you and still lack the tools to stay emotionally present. A narcissist can appear avoidant because your uncertainty is profitable. One struggles with closeness. The other struggles with humility. One may benefit from therapy, education, and practice. The other often resists every request for repair because repair threatens the superior self-image they protect like oxygen. And your body is allowed to be part of the evidence. With an avoidant, you often feel sadness, longing, disappointment. With a narcissistic avoidant, you feel trained. You become hypervigilant. You monitor texts, moods, and silence like you are reading weather patterns for survival. You start editing your needs into smaller and smaller packages. You begin bargaining for basic decency. You feel addicted to rare warmth because inconsistency has conditioned your hope. That is not love growing. That is your nervous system adapting to instability. So the most compassionate and powerful stance is this: you can understand someone's wounds without letting those wounds become your prison. You can be kind without being compliant. You can be patient without abandoning your standards. The moment you request a simple adult baseline, honesty, respect, consistency, repair, you reveal who you are truly dealing with. A non-narcissistic avoidant may struggle and still move toward growth. A narcissistic pattern will often punish the standard, mock the need, or vanish until you lower the bar again. Your job is not to win someone over with endless empathy. Your job is to observe what they protect and to protect yourself accordingly. If they protect their heart from intimacy, there may be fear and a path forward. If they protect their ego from accountability, your clarity is your safety, your boundary is your self-respect, and your next step is not to explain more. It is to choose yourself harder. Ladies and gentlemen, the second truth you need to understand is this. When someone's distance feels strategic instead of scared, you are not dealing with simple emotional overwhelm. You are dealing with a power dynamic. There is a massive difference between a person who pulls back because they don't know how to tolerate closeness and a person who pulls back because your anxiety and confusion gives them leverage. One is emotionally underdeveloped. The other is emotionally tactical. One needs growth. The other needs control. A healthy-ish avoidant often withdraws in a predictable way. They get flooded, they shut down, they need time. It still hurts, but the pattern usually has an internal logic. They don't hover in your system like a ghost. They don't vanish to make you chase. They don't reappear only when you're finally stabilizing. They may be clumsy, they may be inconsistent, but their distance isn't designed to manipulate your self-worth. But when distance becomes a strategy, something else happens inside you. You begin to feel like love is a test you must pass. You start analyzing the timing of their silence. You interpret every delayed reply like a verdict. You become obsessed with doing everything right, so the warmth returns. This is not intimacy. This is conditioning. And the most painful part is that strategic distancing is often subtle. It doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like a soft voice and a vague excuse. Sometimes it looks like charm after disappearance. Sometimes it looks like affection that returns just long enough to reset your hope. You're not crazy for feeling confused. Confusion is the product. When someone can keep you uncertain, they can keep you attached without ever offering real stability. Think about this. In a secure relationship, closeness is not a reward for obedience. In a stable bond, love is not something you earn by shrinking your needs. A partner does not ration warmth to keep you emotionally hungry. But strategic distance uses affection like a currency. It's given in bursts, then withheld. And your nervous system becomes a gambler. You keep waiting for the next win. You keep tolerating the cold because the warm moments feel so relieving they start to feel like proof of destiny. This is why you must watch the pattern beyond the promise. Strategic distance typically comes with a cycle intensity, withdrawal silence, then a return that feels almost cinematic. They reappear with sweetness, nostalgia, or a sudden urge to reconnect, not because they've changed, but because they sense you're moving on. The moment your attention shifts back to yourself, they lean in again, just enough to pull you back into orbit. Not because they're ready for real closeness, but because they're not ready to lose access to you. You will also notice that strategic distance often gets paired with subtle blame. They imply that your needs are too heavy. Your questions are too much. Your emotional honesty is the reason they go quiet. That is a trick that trains you to self-abandon. Because if you believe your feelings because they're withdrawal, you will start censoring yourself. You will start presenting a smaller, quieter version of you. And once you've been trained to silence your truth, they no longer have to offer sincerity. They only have to offer small doses of approval. This is where your standards become your safety. You don't need to accuse someone of being a narcissist to protect yourself from strategic distancing. You only need to observe what happens when you ask for normal adult consistency. You can say calmly and clearly, I value connection that is steady, not confusing. I'm open to a relationship that grows, but I'm not available for hot and cold. If you need space, we can talk about what that looks like. If you disappear without communication, I will step back. That is not punishment. That is self-respect. And then watch their response. A person who withdraws from fear may feel uncomfortable, but they can often understand the request. They may not be perfect, but they will try to create a healthier rhythm. A person who uses distance as a weapon will resist clarity. They will mock boundaries, dodge the conversation, or vanish again to punish your standards. That reaction tells you everything you need to know. Your life is too valuable to spend it decoding silence. Love should not feel like you're trying to solve a riddle while your heart is on the line. If their distance repeatedly makes you anxious, smaller, and desperate to earn basic presence, you are not experiencing a simple attachment issue. You are experiencing a control pattern, and the moment you stop chasing the version of them that appears in crumbs is the moment your power returns to you. Ladies and gentlemen, the third truth is one of the most revealing and most painful signals you will ever recognize in a relationship. When your needs are punished, you are no longer dealing with simple avoidance. You are dealing with a dynamic that trains you to self-abandon. This is where good people get trapped for years because they think the problem is communication, timing, or tone. But the real problem is that your basic human needs are being treated like a crime. A healthy relationship can handle needs. A healthy partner may not always meet every need perfectly, but they do not punish you for having them. The moment you start feeling like you must shrink, edit, or apologize for wanting respect, clarity, reassurance, or emotional presence, your body is telling you something your mind is still trying to rationalize away. Avoidant attachment by itself can look like discomfort with emotional intensity. An avoidant may feel overwhelmed by conflict, intimacy, or expectations. They might pause, go quiet, need space. That can be frustrating, but there is a difference between struggling and punishing. Struggling says, I'm overloaded, I need a moment. Punishing says, you will pay a price for expressing what you feel. One is a limitation, the other is a tactic. And your job is not to decode their childhood story while your self-worth is being eroded. Your job is to notice whether your emotional truth is safe in their presence. Here is how punishment for needs often shows up, and it is insidious because it disguises itself as logic, boundaries, or even morality. You ask for consistency, and they label you controlling. You ask for reassurance, and they call you needy. You express hurt, and they accuse you of drama. You request a basic conversation about the future, and they say you're pressuring them. The goal is not to solve the problem. The goal is to make you regret bringing it up, because once you learn to associate your needs with rejection, silence, or coldness, you begin in their work for them. You stop asking. You stop expecting. You stop trusting your inner compass. Another version of punishment is the emotional disappearing act. You bring up something important, they vanish. They ignore messages. They withhold warmth. They refuse eye contact. They suddenly become too busy. That is not a neutral need for space. That is a message. The message is, if you want connection, you must behave in a way that keeps me comfortable. And slowly, your relationship becomes a performance where the prize is basic decency. You become a negotiator for crumbs that should have been the foundation. This is why your self-doubt grows in these dynamics. Because when someone punishes your needs, they often also rewrite the meaning of love. They tell you love is low maintenance. Love is not asking questions. Love is accepting ambiguity. Love is letting them do whatever they want without accountability. But real love is not the absence of needs. Real love is the willingness to meet in the middle with maturity. If you cannot say, I need this to feel safe with you, without being mocked, blamed, or iced out, then you are not in emotional partnership. You are in emotional compliance. The most dangerous part is how this punishment can hook your empathy. You may think, they're just stressed. They're scared of intimacy. I should be more patient. And yes, patience is beautiful in the right place, but patience without boundaries becomes self-erasure. You can honor someone's emotional limitations without letting those limitations become permission to devalue you. Because a partner who truly cares, even if they are avoidant, will not want you to suffer in silence. They will not want you to feel ashamed for needing love expressed in a consistent way. They may not be perfect, but they will show effort, curiosity, and a desire to improve. So here's a powerful test you can run in your own life, not to diagnose someone, but to protect yourself. Make a simple, calm request, not a speech, not an essay, one clear sentence. I need consistent communication to feel secure. I need respectful tone when we disagree. I need clarity about where this is going. Then watch what happens next. A healthy person might feel challenged but will try. An overwhelmed avoidant might need time but will circle back. A partner who punishes needs will flip the script, attack your character, or withdraw intimacy as a consequence. That reaction is the pattern. That reaction is your answer. And I want to say this with a clarity that cuts through every excuse you have ever made for someone who kept you emotionally hungry. Your needs are not too much. The wrong person will always call your needs excessive because meeting them would require effort, accountability, and emotional adulthood. The right person may not always get it right, but they will never make you feel guilty for asking to be treated with care. Your needs are not a problem to be managed. Your needs are information about what real love should look like in your life. And the moment you stop apologizing for your humanity is the moment your power starts coming back. Ladies and gentlemen, the fourth truth is one of the clearest signals that you are not just dealing with emotional distance. You are dealing with manipulation when someone rewrites reality after they hurt you. The injury is not only the broken promise, the harsh words, the cold disappearance, the sudden switch in energy. The injury is what happens when you bring it up and your experience is treated like fiction. You come to repair and you meet denial. You come to understand and you meet dismissal. You come with a specific moment that left you hurting, and somehow the conversation ends with you questioning your memory, your sanity, your tone, your worth. This is why reality rewriting is such a powerful red flag, because it attacks the foundation of intimacy itself. A relationship cannot be safe if the truth is negotiable. A relationship cannot be loving if your lived experience is constantly put on trial. And this is where many people get stuck, not because they lack intelligence, but because they are trying to love someone who is committed to controlling the story instead of correcting the behavior. Here is the distinction you must hold in your spine. Healthy love corrects course. Unhealthy power corrects the narrative. A mature partner may feel uncomfortable when you name something painful, but their goal is still to move toward truth. They might be defensive for a moment. They might need time to regulate, but you will see signals of accountability, curiosity, and care. Someone operating from narcissistic patterns does something else. They do not ask, "How did my actions impact you?" They ask, "How do I protect my image?" And you will see it in the same three moves repeating again and again. Denial, that didn't happen. Even when it clearly did. Minimization, it wasn't that serious, even when your nervous system is shaking. Blame shifting, you made me do it. Or, this is your fault for reacting like that. Each move creates fog. The fog isn't random. The fog is the strategy. Because if you are busy proving reality, you are not asking for change. If you are busy defending your feelings, you are not insisting on respect. And once you step into that courtroom, you can spend months and years trying to win a verdict that love should never require. This becomes especially confusing when the person also shows avoidant behaviors. You may assume the deflection is just overwhelm. You may think they are shutting down because conflict scares them. But shutting down and rewriting reality are not the same. A shutdown is a nervous system response that can be followed by repair. Reality rewriting is an active maneuver. It requires intention. It is the choice to invalidate what you experienced so they can escape accountability. If every serious conversation turns into you being labeled too sensitive, too needy, too dramatic, or too demanding, you must stop interpreting that as a misunderstanding and start seeing it as a pattern that benefits them. You are not hard to love because you want clarity. You are not too much because you want consistency. You are asking for the minimum that makes a relationship emotionally safe. The cost of this pattern is enormous. You start rehearsing your emotions before you speak. You soften your truth so it sounds less threatening. You bring receipts for basic decency, screenshots, timelines, exact quotes, because you've learned that your word alone won't be respected. You accept almost apologies that contain zero ownership. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I didn't mean it like that. You misunderstood me," and you confuse politeness with repair. Over time, you stop trusting your instincts. You begin to believe that peace comes from silence, that love comes from self-editing, that safety comes from asking for less. That is not intimacy. That is self-erasure dressed up as patience. And if you are a loving, self-aware person, this dynamic can hook you faster because your goodness becomes the bait. You want to be fair. You want to see both sides. You want to communicate better. So you try harder, speak softer, explain longer, and you assume your effort will eventually unlock their accountability. But accountability is not something you can inspire. in someone who does not value it. Love does not require you to abandon reality to keep the connection alive. A relationship that only works when you doubt yourself is not a relationship built on love. It is a relationship built on control. So your path forward is not louder arguments. It is calmer clarity. You name the specific behavior, you state the impact, you set the standard. When you disappeared without communicating, I felt unsafe. When you mocked my feelings, I felt disrespected. I need consistency and respect to continue. Then you let their response reveal the truth. Growth looks like listening and effort. Manipulation looks like ridicule, punishment, or another round of reality bending. You are not here to diagnose anyone. You are here to protect your life, your heart, and your self-trust. Because the moment you can say, I know what I experienced, is the moment you stop being controllable and start being free. Ladies and gentlemen, the fifth truth is a heartbreak that masquerades as hope. They keep you close enough to supply them, but never close enough to truly know them. And that difference can steal years of your life if you don't name it clearly. Because this kind of person doesn't always look cruel. They can look charming, calm, even deep. They can sound like they're just cautious, just slow, just guarded. But underneath the surface, the structure of the relationship reveals the truth. You are allowed in as a resource, not as a partner. You are welcome for your loyalty, your patience, your understanding, your attention, your admiration, your emotional labor. But you are blocked from the level of intimacy that would require them to be consistent, accountable, and emotionally exposed. This is where confusion becomes the glue. You get just enough connection to stay emotionally invested, and just enough distance to keep you uncertain. There are moments of warmth that promise a future, but the future never arrives in behavior. There are pockets of affection that feel like redemption, but they are not followed by stable commitment. The relationship becomes a revolving door of almost together, almost serious, almost changing you, almost changing. You are fed emotional trailers instead of the full movie, and because you are a loving human, you keep believing the best scene is still coming. What makes this dynamic so addictive is that the person often knows exactly how to hook your heart. They will mirror your values in the early stage. They will talk about loyalty, depth, destiny, and rare connection. They will speak in a way that makes you feel seen, even if they never intend to sustain that level of presence. Then, once attachment forms, the rules quietly change. You begin noticing that closeness is welcome when it benefits them, but inconvenient when it requires sacrifice. They will accept your care, but struggle to offer steady care back. They will accept your forgiveness, but resist meaningful repair. They will accept your loyalty, but label your boundaries as pressure. They will accept your emotional availability, but treat their own as optional. And you might not recognize this as a pattern at first because you're too busy trying to become easy to love. You start reducing your needs. You start smoothing out your silence. You start making yourself more flexible, more patient, more quiet, more understanding. And the tragedy is that the more you shrink, the more the relationship appears to improve, because you are now demanding less of them. This is the hallmark of a supply-based bond. You are not loved for your wholeness, you are kept for your function. Your function might be comfort, validation, stability, attention, a home base they can return to when their ego needs reassurance. A person who carries the emotional weight so they can remain light. And this is why they often resist definition. They dislike labels when labels imply accountability. They dislike clarity when clarity implies consequences. They dislike consistency when consistency would require them to grow up emotionally. You will see it in the paradox of access. They want access to you on their terms. They want you to be emotionally available, but not emotionally demanding. They want your affection, but not your expectations. They want your loyalty, but not your questions. They want the privileges of partnership without the discipline of partnership. That is not love struggling. That is love being extracted. And pay attention to how your inner life evolves in this dynamic. You may start feeling like you are waiting for permission to relax. You may become hyper, focused on their moods. You may feel that your peace depends on how close they are to you that week. When you finally begin to detach, they often sense it and pull you back with a sudden surge of attention. This is not always conscious scheming in a cartoonish way, but it is a predictable power reflex. The moment you stop supplying the emotional energy that stabilizes them, they reach for it again. Just enough to keep you in orbit. A healthy bond moves toward mutual visibility. You learn each other's inner world, not just each other's preferences. You feel increasingly safe to speak, to need, to be honest, to be imperfect. But in a supply-based dynamic, the moment you try to move deeper, you hit a wall. You ask for transparency, and they call it interrogation. You ask for commitment, and they call it pressure. You ask for emotional availability, and they call it neediness. This is how your normal desires for secure love get reframed as unreasonable demands. So the question that changes everything is not, do they care about me? Because even unhealthy people can care in fragments. The real question is, do they show up in a way that honors my humanity consistently? Because the person who truly values you will not only want your love, but will want to be worthy of it. They will not keep you in the gray zone to preserve control. They will not require you to betray yourself to stay connected. They will not make you feel like access to them is a reward you must earn with silence and patience. When you recognize this pattern, you stop begging for deeper intimacy from someone who is only offering transactional closeness. You stop mistaking scarcity for value. You stop calling inconsistency a love story. You start seeing the truth, that being kept around is not the same as being chosen, and being desired is not the same as being respected. Ladies and gentlemen, the sixth truth is one that cuts through every excuse, every label, every story you've tried to make beautiful. Your nervous system is the evidence, not your hope, not their potential, not the version of them you met in the beginning. Your body is the truth teller when your mind is still negotiating, because safe love doesn't make you feel like you're constantly bracing for impact. Safe love doesn't turn your phone into a heartbeat monitor. Safe love doesn't make you feel high one day and abandoned the next. When your nervous system is anxious, destabilized, addicted to crumbs, and slowly losing self-trust, you are not in romance, you are in a push-pull conditioning cycle. This is where a lot of strong, intelligent, loving people get trapped, because you assume your anxiety means you're too sensitive. You assume your need for reassurance means you're insecure. You assume the turbulence is just a temporary phase, a misunderstanding, a rough patch that once they finally see your value. But what if your anxiety is not a flaw? What if it's a signal? What if your body is screaming because it knows something your heart keeps trying to rescue? Push-pull dynamics operate like emotional addiction. The reason they feel so powerful is not because the connection is rare and destined. It's because the brain is wired to chase unpredictable rewards. When affection is inconsistent, when warmth arrives in bursts, when closeness is followed by sudden coldness, your system becomes hypervigilant. You don't relax into love, you scan for it. You start measuring your worth by their availability. You treat their attention like oxygen. That is not intimacy. That is survival mode wearing the costume of passion. Notice the pattern in your day. If your mood rises and falls based on whether they text, whether they're nice today, whether they're temporarily affectionate, you're living inside their emotional economy. Your life begins to orbit them. Your appetite, sleep, focus, confidence, even your sense of identity can get hijacked by this cycle. You start thinking about what you said wrong, how you could have been softer, calmer, less emotional, more patient. You become the manager of their comfort at the cost of your peace. And here is the most heartbreaking part. The push-pull cycle can masquerade as deep love because the relief feels so intense. When they pull away, you feel panic. When they return, you feel a rush of hope and safety. That relief can get misinterpreted as proof that you are meant to be. But relief is not love. Relief is your nervous system coming up for air after being held underwater. This is why crumb love becomes addictive, because a small dose of warmth after a period of cold can feel like a miracle. A basic apology feels like transformation. A gentle weekend feels like a new chapter. But your body doesn't just need moments. Your body needs consistency. Your heart doesn't just need chemistry. Your heart needs safety. When you start lowering your standards into silence just to keep the peace, that is your nervous system adapting to instability. not your love becoming stronger. If you've been saying, "I'm confused," that confusion matters. Confusion is a red flag when it becomes chronic. Healthy love may be complex, but it isn't disorienting. Healthy love does not require you to decode silence, interpret vague signals, or guess where you stand. When you are constantly uncertain, you are constantly controllable. Because uncertainty makes you chase. Uncertainty makes you overgive. Uncertainty makes you prove yourself to someone who should already be meeting you with adult consistency. Pay attention to who you are becoming. If you used to be calm and now you're anxious. If you used to be expressive and now you're careful. If you used to trust your instincts and now you second guess everything. If you're checking, waiting, calculating, rehearsing. This isn't just a relationship strain. This is your selfhood under pressure. And I want you to hear this clearly. Your nervous system does not need a diagnosis to justify your boundary. You do not have to label someone a narcissist to decide that you deserve emotional safety. You do not have to prove intent to validate impact. You don't need a confession from them to choose peace for yourself. The pattern is enough. The feeling is enough. The cost is enough. So the most courageous move you can make is to stop arguing with your body. Stop calling your distress overthinking when it's actually a rational response to emotional unpredictability. Stop blaming yourself for reacting to the environment you're in. This is not about being perfect. This is about being protected. Because love should feel like a place you can breathe, not a maze you can't escape. When you choose a relationship that calms your nervous system, you don't lose love, you lose chaos. You don't lose passion, you lose instability. You don't lose a soulmate, you lose a cycle that was training you to accept less than what your heart was always meant to have.